So I'm here with Andrew Marcus, who is the director of a documentary I came across maybe a month or so ago. I think it was Hating Breitbart, which was all about the life and times of the man who was Andrew Breitbart. So we're going to dive right into that. First of all, I think we should introduce yourself there, Andrew. Obviously, Andrew Marcus is you know, just to clarify the difference there. You are the director of this said documentary, correct?
That is correct. If you want
Awesome.
you to differentiate, you can call me Andy if you like, if that
Andy.
helps.
Okay, Andy, fantastic. So that's perfect. So take us through. Let's maybe start at the beginning. I'm keen to hear how did this documentary come together? What was the time frame when from beginning to end? I'm sort of keen to start there.
Okay, so interestingly, with this documentary, we began filming it before we even knew we were filming this documentary. We were
It definitely comes off like that.
it stemmed out of covering the Tea Party. I live in Chicago, and so I was on the ground covering protest movements in this town. And when the Tea Party erupted, I was really right here for it. I have very original content from the birth of the Tea Party, at least in this area. And Andrew Breitbart came out to speak September of 2009 at a tea party in this region. It was in Quincy, Illinois, but I don't know. Not many people know where that is. So, and that was the first time I had seen him speak at a tea party, and I began to notice that he had the Tea Party. There were a lot of grassroots organizers and wonks, policy wonks, a lot of boring people, politicians
Yeah.
speaking at these tea parties, and Andrew Breitbart would get up and he spoke to this Quincy Tea Party, and he just carried such a genuine, raw message. He
Mm.
didn't have any script. He didn't have any talking points. He spoke off the cuff, from the hip, and he electrified the audience. And I
Yeah. Oh,
that was really the
absolutely.
first time I was like, okay, well, this cat is interesting. And and then we began to follow him. We hadn't even asked him if we could follow him. We just decided, okay, look, he's going to be at this thing called the National Tea Party Convention. We should go to that and capture him and see what happens there. And it was what happened there
Yeah.
that turned this into a documentary, into a real
Yeah, I
story.
love that, Andy. I love that. I do. I think it's amazing because it really does come off as this very organic documenting of the life of this person, Andrew Breitbart. And it was interesting. It's funny, as I said off record, Gavin McInnes was the person that mentioned him to me for the first time, and he goes, he was just happy to be alive. Like that's how he described him. And I was like, man, it's so true. And I love that you highlighted the fact that he didn't have these talking points. He came across, and there was something I think it was a line in the documentary which says the reason that the left hated Andrew Breitbart so much was because he understood the left. You know what I'm saying?
Well, he grew up in Brentwood, Los Angeles. So Brentwood's a little area in Los Angeles, and
Yeah.
it is the epicenter of the of political correctness in our country, of our media culture, of our entertainment culture. And so he basically grew up behind enemy lines, so to speak. He knew
Yeah.
exactly how these people thought. He knew
Yeah.
exactly how they operated. And so he spoke their language.
Yeah.
We would go to protests, where we would be covering people doing these really absurd, crazy things, and he would be like, "Oh yeah, I know that person from I know that person from here. I know that person from there."
Yeah.
He knew
He's
all
like
of
an
these
insider.
people. They all knew him. So that
Yeah.
was definitely, I think it was what informed, in a sense, his betrayal of he felt betrayed, I think, by what they were doing,
Yeah.
because in a sense,
Yeah.
what they do betrayed, everything he must have thought or known growing up.
Yeah.
And so I think that in part animated
It's funny,
how he felt about it.
not to, I mean, just to tie this briefly back to myself, I think, I can relate to that concept so much in my story as well, because I grew up, as I say, in this very sort of conservative Christian environment, and inevitably started asking questions that you're not supposed to ask and pushing boundaries, and inevitably kind of being sort of kicked out of the tribe in a way, and it's funny because I can totally relate to that thing of that being the insider and going, I know how these people think because I was one of them, and I wonder, not to go, to sort of rewind too far, but I wonder if you're able to give a sort of a thumbnail sketch of the transition of Andrew, and how he sort of went from being an insider, as you said, to sort of making this drastic shift.
Well, long before we ever came to document him or know him, and it's prior to the narrative of the film, and not many people know this about Andrew, but he was one of the co-editors of the Drudge Report. He was at the time, I don't know if he was co-editor yet, but he was working with Matt Drudge during the whole Monica
Sorry, for us
Lewinsky
down here in
affair.
New Zealand, what was the Drudge Report?
The Drudge Report. Oh my God, the Drudge Report. I'm happy to let all of you know about the Drudge Report. The Drudge Report is the most important news site, at least here in the States. It's a very simple website that was started many years ago by a genius named Matt Drudge, who also had the genius to bring in a gentleman named Andrew Breitbart. And together, they are the ones who broke the story. I don't know if your viewers will have ever heard of Monica Lewinsky. Monica Lewinsky is the woman who Bill Clinton had an affair with. She was the intern who had the infamous blue dress that had President Bill Clinton's DNA on it. These guys, Matt Drudge and Andrew Breitbart, were, and I think it was mostly Matt Drudge, but Andrew was there working in the background when they broke that story.
Yeah.
And it was really one of the first instances of new media busting down the door when mainstream media knew about that story. I believe it was for months, and did not run it because it just was a narrative they didn't want to carry. And so new media came along and they busted the story wide open. And I can tell you, one of the things that animated Andrew Breitbart was watching, the seats of power in this country destroy this woman's life, Monica Lewinsky. They destroyed her reputation. They, eviscerated her in the press. And, that was a special kind of hypocrisy that Andrew Breitbart couldn't take, where you had the vanguard of women's rights. The left in this country holds itself up as the gatekeepers of women's rights. They portray everyone else as having this war on women, and yet they will just destroy someone. They'll destroy a young woman at the drop of a hat.
Andy, did you see Monica Lewinsky's latest TED Talk that was not that long ago?
No, I did not see it.
It was amazing.
Does she speak of this? Does she speak of the whole affair?
Of course it comes up. I mean, of course.
I mean, that's what they want her for, right?
But no, quite honestly, I do encourage people to check it out. I might even put a link to it. She came across very, very human and very grounded, and it was quite amazing. Like, I was like, wow, she was talking all kinds of things about the number of rap songs she's been referenced in and all this sort of thing. It's funny because, you do realize, and this was something that really struck me about Breitbart, was this unflinching and unapologetic, like, just this hunting for the truth, right? Just the facts, right? And it's funny for me because I'm sort of learning it, I've got this sort of 20/20 hindsight where I haven't learned about this forwards. I'm learning about this backwards, if that makes sense, So, when I come across the likes of Milo Yiannopoulos, who I spoke to last year, and he says things to me like, I don't care about people's feelings. He goes, I care about the facts, And you sort of start to learn about this ethos and this world that he's kind of part of. You go, oh, okay. And it's funny because I'm doing this sort of unofficial Milo Yiannopoulos podcast at the moment because he's doing this the Dangerous Faggot tour, these college campuses.
Right, yeah, they're blowing up all over the place. It's amazing.
Did you see the first event he did?
Yeah, oh yes.
It was like I said. I didn't realize they were shooting a sequel to Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, it's a reality show and it's taking place on every campus in our country.
These girls got up. What is the girl? She says, "This man speaks hate," and they started smearing their face with red paint.
Yep.
I was like, what in the actual, like, fuck?
Right. Well, and that's, when I look at that, and I'm not surprised at all. And I think that, Milo knows when when they program that, they have a pretty good idea that that's probably going to happen, because anyone who's been paying close attention to the campuses in this country knows that the left has completely radicalized. They are totally devoid of any ability
It's a cult.
they can't let in any outside ideas. They need these so-called safe spaces.
Yeah.
I mean, which really are the last thing they are is safe for anybody that has a dissenting opinion. I mean, as that event shows. Yeah, Milo, he fits right in the mold of Andrew Breitbart. Breitbart had, what you were talking about reminds me of two things that Breitbart would say. He would say, "Apologize for what?"
Yeah.
That was, the right is constantly apologizing, and he really brought it.
Yeah,
he injected this attitude of apologize for
it's
what.
funny, and Gavin McInnes, I've heard, I don't know if he necessarily reflected it with me, but I've heard him say, this sort of idea when you've got two people and they're disagreeing, he says it's just a matter of one person having more facts, right?
Right.
He's like, I think he gave one example of a difference of opinion that was kind of valid, but he's like, more often than not, it's about the level of information that we have, sort of thing. And it's funny. I listened to a recent interview that Milo did on his tour, and you sort of stop and scratch your head and you go, why are these thoughts and opinions even controversial? Like, he's just advocating free speech essentially at the end of the day, right? Like,
right, yeah, but unfortunately, that's where
I get it. I get the, I get it, but at the same time, I don't. I'm like, why is this even a big deal?
It shouldn't be, and again, so here, let me bring it back around, because you're hitting on it again. That the second thing that Andrew was fond of saying is that truth isn't hate; it's truth.
Yeah,
and
I think I saw a quote similar to that. Truth isn't hate; it's truth.
That's really essentially what you're talking about, where they take the truth and turn it into apparently hate speech, and they've elevated this idea that everyone needs to never be triggered, always feel safe. It has become they have through this vocabulary that the left has created, they've weaponized stupidity.
Yeah.
And their people have picked it up and run with it, and it's really amazing how good they are at it.
I wonder if you have any thoughts on this, Andy, because I've found in talking to sort of this older generation, say, women who are in their mid-30s or early 40s, and you talk to them about concepts like feminism and all this sort of stuff and the language they use, and it seems like, and quite honestly, I've come across a number of women who are quite frankly ignorant of what's been like imported in the name of things like feminism. They don't actually know. And I spoke to Lauren Southern, as well, and I said, do you think that what's happening in some respects is that people are just ignorant? Like, it's almost like some of these terms are just literally being hijacked. Would you say there's
I think there's two things going on. Well, at least two things going on. I'm a dinosaur. I'm in my mid-40s, so I can give you some perspective that way. That those around me who would subscribe to the left, and I'm in Chicago, so I'm surrounded by people who are subscribers to the left, and in my generation and older, they can't believe the things that I tell them are going on. Yeah. They're incredulous that these things are happening. The younger generation, it's like I said, it's more fascinating than just them hijacking terms. It's insidious.
Yeah.
They have invented their own vocabulary, and now they are using that vocabulary to shut down free speech and freedom of thought. So this whole, words like safe spaces, mansplaining, cis, like all this really trigger events. I mean, like that's what I'm talking about. It's right. Well, it's a straitjacket. They've created all these words to create a straitjacket around all of us, and that was Andrew Breitbart saw that coming a mile away.
I know there was something I like going back to the documentary, because anyone who's listening to this, you absolutely have to watch this documentary. It's amazing. But he predicted the outcome, right? There'd be certain things that would happen, and he goes, they're going to label you racist, sexist. He called it before it happened, right? There's a quote here on online I just came across that says, this is Andrew Breitbart in his own words. He says, "Walk toward the fire. Don't worry about what they call you. All those things set against you are because they want to stop you in your tracks. But if you keep going, you're sending a message to people who are rooting for you, who are agreeing with you. The message is that they can do it too." And that's like, this is why I'm so glad to have this conversation and to be reflecting on Andrew Breitbart. And because I'm like, my immediate thought, Andy, was when I saw this documentary, I was like, why don't more people know about this guy? And I'm down here in New Zealand, obviously, a little bit removed from the American context. But I'm like, I almost want to become this I was a street evangelist actually in my background, but I was like, I always want to become this evangelist and convert people to, like, you have to know who this guy was. Like, you have to understand, because, and it's funny, I completely sort of doted on Milo when I started my interview with him. I said, my first question, Milo, is, are you the most interesting person on the planet right now, or have we just become utterly dull, dull and boring, And he goes, I love the why are you so awesome questions, But honestly, I was really taken back and staggered, because I'm like, as I said to you, as I reflected, I am this person who, sometimes, I'm the kind of person, I'll have the opposite opinion just because I don't like to be mainstream, kind of thing. And, I like to push back and I like to challenge. I like to create space to at least have the conversation. And that's what it seemed to me that Andrew Breitbart highly valued, right? Was not just going, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, you're wrong. But he's going, let's actually talk about the facts and let's have a nuanced discussion, right? And I think I'm sure you'll agree with this sentiment, but that's what seemed to piss people off on the left, because as Milo reflected to me as well, that the left are all about narrative over fact, correct? Like,
100%.
It's narrative over fact. It's like, we'll push this story because, there's, some rape allegation that will turn out to be false, but we'll still push the narrative because we need to talk about these things, sort of thing.
Right, the Rolling Stone article.
Bullshit. It's like horrible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the reason that they hated Andrew, the reason the left hated Andrew, those in the left who understood what he was about, they hated him because he. I hate to do this. It sounds so cheesy, but I'm going to tie it back to the quote that you read. It's so perfect in a radio world. The quote about just walking into the fire and the effect that has on other people.
Yeah.
That is why they hated Andrew Breitbart, because he was becoming a center of gravity that emboldened other people to do similar work or the same work, or to do their version of what he was doing, to be bold in their own way and strike out at the straitjacket that they were feeling too. I can name any number, but your listeners should go look for a guy named Jeremy Siegel. He goes under the name Rebel Pundit. He worked with Andrew Breitbart too. Just a guy who was the living embodiment of being inspired by Andrew Breitbart. An army of Breitbarts. That's what he called it. It was an army of Breitbarts.
So this was a reflection. Because I'm connected with Milo on Skype, and I keep spamming him every day. He's like super busy. I'm hoping to get him back on at some point. But this is something I sent to him after I watched the documentary Hating Breitbart. I said, "You've set a fire underneath me, Milo." I said, "Please keep doing what you're doing." I said, "Please continue to be a fuck you to these people that want to tell us that we're all racist, sexist, homophobic bigots."
Right.
I said, "The tides are shifting, and it feels good to be on the right side of history."
That's an optimistic voice. I hope I'm feeling not quite so optimistic these days, but I hope you're right.
The left are kind of winning?
What's that?
Are you sort of suggesting that the left are winning, or?
I unfortunately believe that they are.
This is why I needed to connect with you. You need to.
I hate to say this. I hate to be the pessimistic voice here. Unfortunately, the right in this country is so screwed up. They can't. Andrew used to lament about this. They can't sell freedom. He used to say, if you can't sell freedom, you suck. And that pretty much sums up the right in our
Yeah.
country right now.
Do you
They
know what?
can't
I'm
sell.
so glad. It's amazing to me how candid you're being right now, and I love that because I am insanely optimistic. And you know what? Quite frankly, I don't know why. Sometimes I don't. I really don't. And Andrew struck me as a person, as you say. He obviously, like you said, he lamented this reality as well. But at the same time, I think in the face of all of this, we have to be more resilient. We have to, as you said, you have to fight to win. You have to push back. You have to resist and rail against the system that is quite honestly hurting people. It's even, as Gavin sort of reflected to me, that these, say this rape culture bullshit, it's really actually hurting those it's purporting to help, and it's so self-destructive and it's horrible. And then, like, honestly, I think I'm so glad to be able to highlight this documentary and to connect, as I say, because I'm with you. Like, I'm with you on the kind of cynicism and the kind of feelings you're reflecting. But at the same time, there's something in me. There is this kind of fire in my bones that's just like, fuck this. Like, no, we can't lay down and die here. Like, it is almost like. And look, to be clear, I am one of the wimpiest people I know. Like, I grew up. I'm a mama's boy. Like, I'm not like tenacious or like strong or whatever in that context. But I'm like, there is something in me when and again, like I said, when I found out more about Andrew and who he was, like I said, I quite honestly, I felt this sense of solidarity. I was like, oh, he's one of those kind of people too. He was a provocateur. He wasn't afraid to say the truth, and he wasn't afraid to push back. And so, on this line of conversation, with this kind of lamenting and a little bit of cynicism on the table, where do we go? I mean, do we just kind of roll over and go, oh no, it's all over, or what do we do? I mean, I'm curious to ask as well, going back to the documentary, what were some of the responses that you had once this came? What sort of release did it have? I mean, I don't really know much about when it came out or things like
Yeah,
that. Can you talk
well,
about that?
so well, we like I said, we'd begun filming Andrew at the beginning of the Tea Party in 2009, and we were filming him up through, and this was so chaotic because every time we thought we were done filming him and we would wrap production, something crazy would happen, and we'd be like, well, we
Yeah,
can't tell this story without including this, and we'd be back in production. So
yeah.
we were recording up through, again, I don't know if this is going to be too inside baseball for you guys, for your listeners to know, but the whole Anthony Weiner story, who was a
Oh no, let's talk about that. No, let's talk about that.
yeah, so Anthony Weiner is a congressman here in the United States who is he was a very belligerent progressive. He would attack people, he would tear people down very, very self-righteously,
Yeah.
and he was also very fond of Twitter. And apparently, he was though he was engaged at the time, and though he was a sitting congressman at the time, he was. He was direct messaging dirty pictures of his private parts to people he would meet online, and he accidentally did one of these it was a direct message tweet, but I guess if you accidentally add a hashtag or whatever, if you make some mistake in formatting it at the time, he must have done it
It went public,
accidentally.
essentially.
It went public, and it was only
His
public for like a
private went
half a
public.
second. But the online world, the world of Twitter is pretty permanent, even when you delete it, half a second later,
But
and that was enough time for
yeah.
someone to catch it. And so, the person who caught that online sent it to Andrew. It was an army of Breitbarts, and he sent it to him, and he publicized it. And Anthony Weiner was a scumbag in every sense of the word. The first thing he did was lie and say that he had been
Didn't he
hacked.
essentially use his name as a narrative to sort of go, oh, they're just mocking my name?
Right. He said it's a prank, a play on my name. When you grew up with this name.
That's beautiful. Like, that just highlights what I said earlier, this whole narrative over fact. Like, he literally just used the aesthetics of his name to go, oh, they're just mocking me.
I mean, well, look, that was really poetically, that was the only lie he could possibly tell that fit perfectly, because what did we have here? We had a story of a sitting congressman named Tony Weiner who was taken down, destroyed by a picture of his wiener. I mean, You mentioned.
You can't write this stuff, eh? It's
I
like,
mean, just like the Freud would have a field day with this guy. Destroyed his life. He destroyed his life over that which he probably was picked on as
yeah.
a kid growing up. Imagine that. I
Yeah,
mean,
and isn't it one of those things where, this whole thing, they always say, like, when you tell a lie, if you're going to start lying, at least have a good memory, sort of thing. Um, but isn't it fascinating that like, it's just one of these situations where wouldn't you have just been so much better off just to come out and just be honest? Like, you just made this so much worse. Like, he essentially highlighted the story and made it more, bigger than it really was, right?
right. I'd like to think I live in a country where a sitting congressman texting pictures of his junk to strangers online would still be a big story. But you're right. I mean, look, he was. I just think that his name. He was hosed from the beginning.
Well, this
With
is
his
okay.
name, that was going to become a big story no matter
I want
what.
to dive into some specifics here with the documentary because in tying back to this narrative over fact idea, there was the photo that Andrew highlighted with the guy he turns out to be a black guy, right? That he was like at this was it a Tea Party event when I don't
Yeah,
know,
there was a Tea Party event.
he
I
had a
want to
gun
say
and he was armed essentially.
that's right. It was there were a group of them that showed up
Yeah,
at this
and
party to.
so because and there was also I don't want to rush too quickly through this I suppose. So there was that situation where they were going they basically cut the guy's head off in the photo and said, look, the Tea Party are racist, and going and they got guns and shit, and
That's
he's like,
exactly well.
this
And
is
it
a
was a really
black
big
guy.
news. It was a big news report. It was a reporter by the name of Contessa Brewer, and she put out this report that let me paraphrase her, but she was said there are people showing up at these tea parties, some of them armed, and we have a black president. And I don't think that we can discount the possibility that that's she basically was implying racism, and,
Yeah,
and Andrew was like
the
he
guy
knew the
was
Tea
black.
Party. He knew that this claim of racism was total bullshit. He knew it. And so when
Yeah,
he would hear stuff like that, he'd go look it up. He'd go look for any
yeah.
proof. He'd go look for it. And yeah, when he saw that it was up, when you look at, they cropped the photo that they showed in that report to just show the gun and not show that it was a black person carrying the gun. They
It's
have
so
a
bizarre.
narrative to sell.
They
And that's
really screw themselves over in the long run, eh? And
anyone who is not aligned with the left is a racist.
yeah,
That is the
yeah.
narrative that they have.
I do to get serious for a moment. There is that clip where I think at the very beginning where Andrew sort of says, I got so tired of people being told that they're racist and sexist and homophobic, and there's just that conviction where he's just like, fuck you, like this is bullshit. And there was the guy, I don't know the guy's name. I think it was a salon.com guy. It was in like a press sort of junket thing where the sort of weedy. I don't know the guy's name. You probably know his name.
You're talking about when he leans over into the notepad?
And he starts confronting, and Andrew Breitbart's going, he was confronting him over the fact. Oh, what's the call? Was it the Acorn? Oh, I'll get into the Acorn.
Yeah,
Protest.
there was. So they were. It was right in the middle of
You
the
see,
whole.
Andrew was going innuendo. Like you're trying to say that because this guy had been to an event that had some context around it, that he was by default racist or something.
They were trying to smear James O'Keefe
That's right.
as a racist. Yeah, again, this is think about who we're talking about here. We're talking about the left who basically invented the concept that you can't smear people based on their associations because of the whole red hunt. Because when they were attacking people for being communist, and what would happen is that they would say, well, you are associated with these communists, so you must be communist, all right? So they're the ones that propagated the narrative of you can't. There's no guilt by association, right?
Yeah.
What do? They then turn around to somebody they disagree with, James O'Keefe, and the first thing they do is to try and commit guilt by association. But it blew up in their faces because the way that they tried to do it was James had just on the periphery. He had been a part of helping organize an event about race at this university, and they invited somebody who was not racist and somebody who was racist. Like they brought in both sides to create a conflicting kind of thing, right? At the end of the event, James O'Keefe goes up to the guy who is not racist and says, "Listen, I completely agree with you. I want you to know."
But no, let's not report that.
No, they did not report that. All they reported was that he was at this event where this racist
Yeah.
was speaking, and so therefore he must be racist. It was
It's like
absolute.
saying a Jew is like responsible for the Holocaust because they were present at the time. Like,
I mean, it really it is insidious what they do, and unfortunately, what do they say? A lie makes its way around the world before the truth gets its
yeah.
pants out.
Well,
I
this
mean,
is the thing, and this is what, like, I want to go deep into the, because I need to ask about this Acorn stuff because I'm a little bit out of the loop. But it was fascinating to see the reporting because all they kept doing was going on and on and on about the editing of the tapes, right? They're like, they doctored the tapes, they edited the tapes, and that's as far as the story went. They didn't
right?
seem to. They didn't seem.
Isn't it
They seemed
obnoxious?
belligerent about
It's well, now you're tipping. You're going to help. You're having me explain why I'm so cynical because because you're right. They invented this excuse, heavily edited, heavily edited. It's heavily edited. It's heavily edited, and now you don't need to think. It
yeah,
basically
yeah,
telegraphs to
yeah.
their believers. Here's your excuse. Here's the passphrase so that you don't have to think.
And
Oh, it's heavily edited, and they've trotted
wasn't
it
it
out
fascinating?
repeatedly. Have you seen? Did you? I don't know if you guys are aware of the Planned Parenthood videos that came out
Oh,
of
a
in
little
the
bit,
United
a little
States.
bit, yeah.
So Planned Parenthood is an organization in the United States that does women's health, but really their main function is abortions and reproductive health.
Killing
So
babies.
they were busted by a group of people who, not James O'Keefe, but people like James O'Keefe, people who also inspired by the James O'Keefes and the Andrew Breitbarts of the world.
Yeah.
And they went and recorded undercover video showing that the people that ran Planned Parenthood were selling body parts, fetal
Yeah.
tissue, fetal body parts for top dollar. Now you can
Yeah.
sell tissue at cost, which people, a lot of that's a controversial issue. But what you cannot do is sell it for profit at top
Yeah.
dollar. And that's
Oh,
what they
yeah.
were doing. And the
I
video
wanna,
showed that.
yeah.
Well, hold on a second. Because what they did was they trotted out the same meme of heavily edited. It's heavily edited. It's
Yeah.
heavily edited. And now, and basically, what is, I think, one of the most horrific stories of the decade, the proof that eugenically, essentially, these people are selling fetal body parts for
Yeah.
profit, was dismissed by otherwise caring people. I know plenty of people who are caring, logical, intelligent people who hear that it's heavily edited, and that's it. They're done with it. Like that's
Man, now I'm kind of joining you at like extreme
right.
cynicism. And I tell you what, no, I do want to reflect on this a little bit, and then I want to jump into this Acorn thing in more depth because, so I'm with you because this is what's pissing me off the most is because not because I'm seeing these mindless drones just following the narrative. I'm seeing like. I had a 3-hour Skype call the other day with my twin brother. He lives in Turkey, and
There's two of you.
yeah, no, we're complete opposite personalities. I have to say.
Are you identical?
No. Some people don't even believe we're related, but
All right.
no. I'm emotional. He's logical. That's about as much as you need to know. But we had this 3-hour Skype call. We never talk on Skype, and we talk for 3 hours, and I say because he knows nothing of this like feminist narrative and say so. He's ignorant,
Mm-hmm.
and. Ironically, he lives in a country that is probably in more danger than the West makes up anyway. But so I and this is quite terrifying to me on a very personal level because when you've got flesh and blood, your own family. Because I said to him, we had this amazing. It ended up being this really epic conversation, and I said, I'm terrified, James. I said, I'm actually terrified because I think if you don't understand why I have these convictions I have. And you just see this narrative and you don't really look into the details. I was like, you might not actually ever want to talk to me again. Like, you know what I'm saying? I have this genuine.
Welcome to my Thanksgiving dinner. You guys, I don't know if you guys, you don't have Thanksgiving down there for sure, but our holiday dinners, that's what it is.
Oh, yeah. It's terrifying, right? And I'm seeing these people who are smart, intelligent people who are getting sucked into it. And on the subject of, as I say, I don't know too many facts about this Planned Parenthood stuff, but it's terrifying because when you talk up these concepts of people selling body parts and stuff, you just go, you kind of do buy the narrative before the facts because you go, surely not, right? Like, not a chance. There's no way that's happening. And it's this,
can't be real.
It's these inconvenient truths that we don't want to confront, right? So let's fast forward because I'm keen. So can you give us like a thumbnail, like this Acorn group? What is Acorn? Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Sure. Hold on one second.
That's all right. I can edit it.
Okay, so Acorn was a community organization here in the United States that was, it's sort of hard to explain exactly what they were because, these community organizations, they kind of morph to become whatever they need to be to continue to exist and grow in whatever period of time they're existing in. But what they became involved with was shaking down banks for securing mortgages for low income housing. Okay, so the United States launched this whole program of the ownership society, and they wanted people to. The idea was that people would take pride in their property, and they would get invested in the system, and they would have a foothold in the system if they owned property. And that's actually a really good idea in theory. The problem was that what they were doing was securing 100% loans for these properties, and especially in these low income areas, and it was a disaster. Now, what it wasn't even Breitbart that did this; it was James O'Keefe that did this, and then through brilliance, luck, and happenstance, Andrew Breitbart and James O'Keefe ended up coming together, and together they launched this story. And Breitbart was the one who was the genius for how to launch it. So what James O'Keefe did, James O'Keefe was hip to the corruption inside this Acorn organization, and he proposed the most preposterous situation by which to walk into these Acorn offices and see if they would help him fraudulently get access to loans, even under completely fraudulent and criminal circumstances. So he went in posing with a woman, a woman by the name of Hannah Giles, a brilliant young journalist, who they went in dressed as she went in dressed as a prostitute, and he went in as her pimp. Okay.
Yeah, it was kind of Borat style journalism, wasn't it?
It was so Borat story. I mean, like it was so over the top that you couldn't even believe that they weren't like called out immediately. They went in as this is my prostitute, I'm her pimp, and we are going to run a brothel. Yeah. We need a loan for a property so we can run a brothel filled with underage immigrants. Okay?
Yeah. Oh,
Underage immigrants, and they needed to launder the money, and they went into Acorn office after Acorn office, and in each office, to varying degrees, they were completely willing to take part in the fraud, and fraud had become systemic there. And here's what Andrew Breitbart did, because this is what's really worth highlighting, on top of James's bold genius to go in there. Andrew Breitbart, he understood the media cycle, he understood the media MO, he knew how they operated, and he knew what would happen if James O'Keefe had gone to any of the major networks. They would have done a one-night special report, and then that would be the last you would ever hear about it, because they would trot out the members of Acorn who would come out and say, oh, this is underhanded, this isn't true, blah, 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 and their talking points would get out, and that would be the end of it. And so he devised this way to trap them in their own bullshit. And so he devised, have this be in 5 segments, and let's drop one and let them come out and defend it. Let them think that that's the only one we have.
Oh, right. So he didn't give all the tapes at once.
He set them up beautifully. And he used this to launch his website, Breitbart.com. This was the launch for its original incarnation was called Big Government. Yeah. And he launched it with this story because he brilliantly knew that the first thing that the media would do, absolutely, he knew the media was gonna trot out their leftist propagandists to give the talking points about these videos, and sure enough, they trotted them out. They all lied, said this is an isolated incident. This could, this is we knew about this. And then. Boom, he drops the next video. And they even played the lie again. They came back out and said, no, these are isolated incidences. This is not a systemic thing. We're serious about this. We'll take a look. And then he started dropping the other videos. Wow. And within, I want to say it was within 2 months, Congress voted to defund Acorn in its entirety.
So it's so fascinating to me, Andy, because... there's so many clips on, and I'm just becoming aware of the fact that we haven't even referenced the reality that Andrew Breitbart is no longer with us, right?
That's right.
I just realized we haven't actually mentioned that fact. So it was 2012 he passed away, wasn't it?
That's right. March 1st, coming up on it.
Yeah. So, because I'm thinking, people are going, why aren't we talking to him? I was like, I wish I could.
Right.
Honestly, I wish I could, See, this is why I have to believe in an afterlife, because I'm just like, I have to sit down with him one day. But, it's fascinating. And what I'm trying to say, there's so many clips on YouTube of Andrew Breitbart and these like MSNBC interviews and sitting down with Bill Maher and all this sort of stuff, right? And it's just obvious they just don't like him. The title "Hating Breitbart" for your documentary is just, there's no other title you could have given this documentary. They just didn't like him, and they tried to label him racist and sexist and all this kind of stuff. So there was this other point that came up in the documentary. Was it the Shirley Sherrod, right?
Yes.
So who was she in the context of things? So what was her role?
Okay, so Shirley Sherrod, now we're really getting into inside baseball. And because of that, it was a really tough topic to cover in the film because, Shirley Sherrod is a woman who worked for the Department of Agriculture here in the United States. Right? So now I can already hear your listeners glazing over at the mere prospect of hearing about a woman who worked in as a technocrat in what must seem like an obscure government administration somewhere. But so she was a black woman who worked for the Department of Agriculture, who gave a speech, in the context of the fact that she was this woman working for the Department of Agriculture. She gave a speech to an organization here in the States called the NAACP. The NAACP is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, is what it was called. It's basically a African American civil rights group, but it's really
restricted, right?
Unfortunately, because really all it is just another leftist propaganda arm that is completely willing to.
Matter incarnation.
I mean, it's unfortunate because what should otherwise be a very healthy and good organization is just corrupted by a desire to continue to exist under the context for which it was formed. Anyway, they had in this woman named Shirley Sherrod, and she gave this speech, and the speech tells this a parabola, the story of her transformation from having, racist grudges to no longer allegedly having racist grudges. Okay. Now, Andrew this had been sent to him apparently, months before he ever released it. And he never would have released it, as he tells it, except that there was this giant battle going on where the mainstream media was labeling the Tea Party as racist.
Yeah.
They were the Tea Party, which was a grassroots uprising of conservative and libertarian people in reaction to the leftist surge in this country, and the leftists and their media apparatus were able to label the Tea Party racist through a number of different accusations.
Are you the term libertarian? Can you unpack that a little bit? Because I've heard Milo. I don't actually know what a libertarian is.
So a libertarian, well, okay, there's a couple of different flavors of libertarian, but in essence, it's somebody who believes in personal freedom, personal responsibility, and free markets, small government. So they have a lot of overlap with conservatives, although, like with Republicans in this country. However, they'll diverge on things like abortion or, different social issues. Libertarians don't tend to care about abortion or gay marriage. A lot of conservatives tend to care about those issues, but they all seem to be pretty consistent in terms of small markets.
So what would be the key distincting narrative? Well, I'm terrified to use the word narrative, but say because I don't know what to label myself these days, quite honestly. Would you say conservative has more of that religious thread running through it than a libertarian narrative?
That can, in many instances, that would be the distinction, but there are plenty of conservatives who don't identify as libertarian who are not at all
Okay.
concerned with the
Okay. So
social
it's
or
not. Yeah, it's
religious
not
thing.
one size fits all.
It
Okay.
isn't. It isn't one side. There's a lot. It
Okay.
floats around. Well, look here. Let me make it simple for you. If you are not a progressive leftist, you're a racist. So it doesn't matter what else you are. I mean, that's just the deal. So
Thank you
at
so
any
much.
rate,
Thank you for clarifying.
they were
I'm just a racist. Yeah.
they were
Someone's gonna
well, the
isolate
sooner
that
you
clip.
come to
Yeah.
terms with that, the better, really. So they were labeling the Tea Party as racist, and again, they were doing it by guilt through association. They were saying, there were people holding up racist signs at these tea parties. Okay, now look, you take any event, you go to any event in this country and many others, where you put more than 10 people together and they're holding up signs, I guarantee you one of them is going to be a nut job, all right?
Yeah.
One of those signs is going to be crazy and written by a nut job. Now, it would. What they were doing, what the left was doing, was taking those instances and saying and painting the entire Tea Party with it. And Andrew Breitbart said, this is bullshit, and I'm going to make a point here. And what he did was he basically said, and in the lead up to that, the NAACP passes a resolution out of nowhere. The NAACP passes a resolution condemning the Tea Party's racism and demanding that the Tea Party stand up to its racism.
They're literally just trying to write the narrative.
Oh, I mean that's exactly what they're, and they knew they could generate a tremendous amount of news cycle doing it.
They're just scripting it all.
Absolutely, and with the accomplices in the media. And so Andrew said, "Fuck you," if I can say that on your podcast.
I think I'm sure more than you at this point.
He said, "Fuck you," and he pulled out. He said, "I've got this. This thing has been sitting in my drawer. Now I'm going to use it because it shows your rank hypocrisy. Because what happened in this story, it was not so much about her." It was about the fact that she told the story that had these racist moments in it. And during these racist moments, the audience at the NAACP was laughing. They were laughing at these racist moments that she was recounting. Yeah. They weren't rejecting them. They weren't standing up to them. And basically his point was, you people in glass houses should not be throwing stones.
Well, isn't this kind of, and I mean, I'm a white cis male, so I can't even talk about these things apparently. But isn't it just horrifying to think that there's this narrative being pushed that certain minorities or that some people can't be racist? Like, if you're black, you can't be racist. Isn't that fucking terrifying?
Okay, so the premise of that whole idea is that you are either an oppressor or you are the oppressed. And if you are the oppressed, then you cannot possibly be the oppressor. So think about this. So, okay, their premise is that if you're a minority in America, if you're black, you're brown, you don't have power. Forget the fact that our president is black. You don't have power, and our attorney general and any number of other people. But so under that premise, you don't have power. You can't possibly be racist. Isn't it funny that premise ends in the Middle East, where the minority Christians and minority Jews are always painted as the aggressor by the very same people who will tell you that black people can't be racist. It's absolute rank hypocrisy. I've never made that
correlation in my head. That's funny.
Oh my God! Well, there you are in Israel. Israel is this sliver. It's the existence of this tiny minority, and they are always painted as the aggressor. But under those rules, they can't possibly be racist. Yeah. They're just reacting to a group trying to annihilate.
I just want to go on a little bit of a tangent here because I think it does speak to this. It does speak to this narrative over fact idea. So Milo was recently on this podcast with these the atheists. They call themselves the Drunken Peasants. I don't know if you know them.
I have not.
So did you catch that, by the way?
No, I did not hear that.
Okay, so there was I was recording it as it was live streaming, and I put up a clip on my YouTube channel. They inevitably got around to, because here's the funny thing, as you know, with the likes of Milo, that even these atheists, even though he's a self-described gay Catholic conservative, they can still go with him on most of his points. But inevitably, when it comes around to religion, they bring out the big guns and start trying to mock him and belittle him and things like that. And there's this one guy who's really funny, who's through the whole interview, you could just tell he just hated Milo. He's just pissed off because Milo is coming across like he does, just with the facts and, with his perfect hair. And, and so this guy was just out to get him. He was just out to have a fight and to debate him. And so they never really got onto religion. And this guy says, they were talking about different religions, and this guy says, well, isn't Christianity full of genocide and rape and murder and all this kind of shit? And Milo's point, which I thought was beautiful, like beautifully articulated, which is he basically responded and said, well, if you had pointed to things like the Crusades, you would be on stronger ground. But he goes, but you didn't. He goes, you essentially tried to hold Christianity responsible for every crime committed in a country where Christianity existed. You know?
Isn't that exactly the very thing that they accuse so-called Islamophobes of doing?
Yeah.
I mean,
the cognitive dissonance is just
cognitive dissonance. Hold on a second. We live in a media reality where you can throw a homosexual off a rooftop and it's a footnote, okay? But if you shoot Cecil the lion, they will hunt you down at your home and ruin your life.
Jimmy Kimmel was on TV crying about a lion, you know?
Right.
Oh, it's unreal. It's unreal. It's unreal. It really is. You sort of wonder. I almost picture it like this end of the day for these people, like a set wrap on a movie scene. It's set sort of thing, just going, all right, cut, and they just go home and go, man, this is like hard work keeping up this bullshit narrative. Like we don't actually believe any of these things. And it's funny. I think we should wind down, because otherwise, if we talk for 2 hours, we'll already come across.
We don't want to get off on a tangent.
Crazy conspiracy theorists, you know. I do want to bring up a very interesting point at the end, purposely, but I wrote a blog recently, and it actually, I had a guy, part of what they call the Emergent Church. His name's Brian McLaren. He actually posted my blog a couple of days ago on his website, and my point was this idea that we live in a world where you've got a group of people that believe in this violence narrative, right? They believe that, you know, if you disagree, they'll cut your head off, kind of thing. And then you've got this other group of people who believe in this sort of money narrative, like money is power, right? And then you've got this group in the middle who don't believe in violence, or at least don't want to believe in violence, and lack resources or lack money. So they don't, in the narrative they're trying to kind of navigate, they don't have any currency. And so they're going, what in the hell do we do? And I think, and I'd love to disagree with me by all means if you do, but I think a lot of where this kind of Islamophobic shit comes from, and don't be racist, don't be sexist, I think a lot of it is fueled by this fear of going, I'm just downright fucking terrified.
Right. Well, look, why should you not be allowed to judge people who are trying to kill you?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. People are more scared of offending someone than having their own head cut off.
Yeah, well, that's where I go back to Andrew Breitbart. Apologize for what? I mean, right now, you couldn't have a more clear display of barbarity happening in our world. I won't hear another word about rape culture while they're silent about all the immigrant, refugees.
The police reported it was an uneventful evening.
That's a culture of rape. I mean, I won't.
And they just lie about it.
Right. I mean,
we're lying about it.
We're living in a world where the contradictions are so blatantly on display. Unfortunately, the media, still has 50,000 watts behind it and is broadcasting the lie never ending, and that's
In closing, I think we should maybe wind down a little bit, because I could talk to you for a week, quite honestly.
Listen, I'll leave the line open.
Let's do a part 2 at some point. Yeah, let's get some responses from this. I think hopefully if you can share this on your social media if you like. Go nuts.
Certainly will.
Let's create some conversation, because I'm so keen for that. So I watched, again, I purposely want to talk about this at the very end, because I don't want to come across like a nut job, whatever, but I know that there are clips I saw, say, the likes of Alex Jones talking about Andrew Breitbart and talking about his death, and essentially, basically, in not so many words, going, I think something was going on here. Like, what? I don't know if you even want to speak to that point. You don't have to, obviously, but it's public knowledge that there are theories around the suspicious nature of his untimely demise.
Sure, I'll speak to it. I mean, look, I don't have the be-all and end-all answer, but I can give you my opinion First, my opinion on Alex Jones is that he's a nut job. That's
No,
my
I'm with you. I'm
personal
with you. I
my
post
personal
everything
opinion on
you
Alex
do.
Jones. No, I'm just throwing that in there. I've seen his behavior before, yeah, separate and apart from anything he thinks about Andrew Breitbart.
Yeah.
Andrew Breitbart, I right off the top, I do not believe that he was assassinated or killed.
Okay.
I,
Okay.
I
Okay.
think I think that people feel that way is actually a testament to exactly the kind of potential power he did represent and how big a
Wow.
loss that he was, that people felt he was somebody who was worthy of being assassinated.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but you know what? This was a guy who he had had an heart episode a year earlier.
Okay. Okay.
He had a stent put in. I think it was a stent, or I
I'm
mean,
so glad I asked about this
he had the
now.
blockage cleared. He had a procedure. He was catheterized and had a procedure
Right.
done about a
Right.
year earlier. It was something that was on his radar, and
Okay.
on top of it, and I have to stress this because to some degree, they killed him. The left killed him in a way
Yeah.
because the stress of this was a family man. He had
Yeah.
four young children and a wife, okay, who needed him and looked up to him and uh, he, on national news, national outlets on a regular basis, he's being called a racist.
Yeah.
All right, and
It's
people
got to
think
take
that
its toll on your family,
it
eh?
takes its toll on the family. It takes its toll on him. It's a tremendous amount of stress. Then you add on top of that, he was constantly flying around the country. He
Yeah.
never said no to an event. He went to everything that he could because he believed,
Yeah.
that it was helping him develop what he was trying to develop because he believed so passionately that there were so few voices getting the word out that he needed to do it. So he was a ton of airline travel, coast to coast. I've never seen anybody sleep less than Andrew Breitbart or
That
have
is
more
really
energy
wild.
in the process. He
Yeah.
burnt the candle from both ends. And
Wow.
having watched that and watched the stress he was under and knowing that he had a heart condition as a context, that's what leads me to believe, even with there's a lot of other circumstantial stuff out there, like the coroner dying, the coroner that
Oh
performed his
wow.
autopsy. The coroner that performed his autopsy died, was poisoned.
Oh, I think.
Now,
Oh yeah.
meanwhile,
Was it in the documentary or?
no, 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 because we didn't get it because, well, he
Oh well,
died.
well, I must have come across it because I already knew that.
Yeah, he died after the documentary
Oh
was
wow.
was wrapped. So yeah, we were in the process of developing the marketing plan with it, and that's when he passed away.
Yeah.
Which at another time I will tell you about
Yeah.
the
Let's
genius
time for
marketing
another
plan
chat.
he
Yeah.
came up with for that film. He was an absolute genius. Let me just say. Uh, 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 Given all that, I don't believe that he was assassinated, but I can tell you, when you put out a movie, you put out a biopic about somebody, okay, and your main character dies, you'd be surprised how many people come out of the woodworks to tell you, "Oh my God, that must be really great for your film. Oh my God, how lucky for your
Yeah.
film."
And
How,
listen.
such
Yeah.
a fucking morbid thought. But so
Yeah.
I can just
Yeah.
tell you this: Andrew Breitbart was a genius. Losing him was the worst thing that ever happened to us for that picture
Mm.
because he had developed a marketing plan. He was out of the loop for the film. We didn't show him the film until we were just about done because we didn't want it to affect him and what he was doing, and
Wow.
we were being independent. And so, but at the end, we showed him the film. This was a few months before he passed away,
Oh wow.
and he called me one day about 5 days after watching the film, and he said, "I've got this idea." And he laid this idea on me, and it was unbelievable. It rocked my world. It would have been the biggest thing ever for marketing the film. Losing him for a myriad of reasons was just
Yeah.
a tremendous, tremendous loss. And
Yeah. Oh
people
wow.
see the film.
Oh.
You can tell your audience how to get a hold of the film in New Zealand. I'm not even sure exactly how
Yeah.
to do
Should
that.
should be
I'm
should be
glad
have
it's
some
up there on
copies.
YouTube, but I would be happy to get you some copies if you can put them in people's hands.
Oh,
I'll get them to you.
absolutely. You
Uh,
better believe it.
um,
I'll give
so
5 copies to my listeners. Let's just make up a.
But next time I will be happy to tell you what his marketing plan was. It was
Yeah. Yeah.
quintessential perfect Breitbart.
Yeah. No, look, I'm so glad I did touch on that point at the end because I'm glad to get your voice of reason on the table on that delicate subject because it's, and as you reflected, I'm so glad we reflected sort of in closing on his humanity that, hey, whether you hated him or you loved him, he was a guy with a family and kids and a wife so yeah, I mean, I'm just so glad that on a personal note, I'm so glad that I came across, this documentary and learned more about who he was and things like that. So maybe we'll wrap this up. We'll call this part 1 for now. And thanks so much for your time, Andy.
Oh, thank you so much.